Okay, now that they're recording, I'm going to reintroduce myself. Carrie West. I'm appointed at First United Methodist here in Colorado Springs downtown. My purpose today is to inspire you to boldness in finding community partners to collaborate for for outreach, missions, transformation, but mostly for those who are on the margins or who are not in our churches. So this has been a journey, and so this first part of our time together, I just want to share with you the journey I've been on, because it hasn't been something that just started a few months ago. It actually started way before I even came to First here in the Springs. And so I want to take you through that, because I think that it's really a part of why I have found some success so far here in the Springs with collaborating with some community partners. So this started for me over a year and a half ago. I was in another appointment. I was in Pueblo West at the church there in Pueblo West as the solo pastor. And I was just feeling I needed to figure out what God was calling me to, because it just felt like there was something more for my ministry, and I wasn't finding it in that moment. Serving a church as the senior solo pastor, and I just had this longing to think of something different, of what was my passion for ministry and the gifts that God had called me to years. So it started with me spending time in Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4, I forgot to get it up on my phone, is Paul's exhortation to the church to view the church and the people in the church as all necessary for the ministry, the sharing of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so in that, there is a verse that says, "And he appointed some apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers." So it's called the APEST. Apostle, A, P, prophet, E, evangelist, C, or S, shepherd, and T, teacher. And so I spent quite a bit of time in that verse, especially, and took a test called the Fivefold Ministry Test, which I learned about through Fresh Expressions training, as well as 3DM training, and I'm going to tell you more about that in a few minutes. So in doing that, I took the test, and I found out that I was an evangelist prophet, and I never knew I was that. I never knew that those were my spiritual gifts. And there are a lot of spiritual gift tests out there, by the way. So, I've taken another one, and humor is the top gift on that one particular test, which is also very true. Sometimes I have really great humor, and sometimes it's inappropriate, but we all laugh at me anyway, right? But so humor is probably really my top. But evangelist and prophet, so I had to really dig in and say, what does that mean? Because growing up, evangelist meant something much different than I would want to be. Yeah, I wasn't planning to be on TV or to just shout out things about God or Jesus or Spirit. So I had to do quite a bit of work on what does it mean to be an evangelist and what does it mean to be a prophet. And that APEST testing and training source, which is again called fivefoldministry.com, is where you find it. The prophet is one who shares the heart of God. Right. Okay, so we think of the prophets being predicting the future, or only giving warnings when the people are not doing what they're supposed to do, or leaders of a nation or an organization are not following God's ways. But really, a prophet is about sharing the heart of God. And I've had many experiences of sharing the heart of God with people. If I feel like something is on my heart to say to somebody, I would say that. That's the gift of prophecy. So I figured that out, that my gift is to share that heart that God has for all of God's people. Yeah. Then evangelism. I mean, I love Jesus. So I don't mind telling people I love Jesus. I love what Jesus did. I love what Jesus teaches us. I love representing Jesus to the best of my ability in my ministry. And so I started leaning into that gift as well. Then I started thinking about, so what is it that I can do with my gifts? Because I was leading the church, I was preaching every Sunday, I was teaching classes, and yet none of those are my spiritual gifts. I'm a decent preacher, and yet that's not high on my spiritual gift inventory, if you will. So I just really did some inner deep thinking about, so how is God calling me to use these gifts in this point in time in my life? So I started thinking about, so then what am I passionate about? Because what I'm passionate about is different than what I'm gifted for. Right? And so my passions have been for those who are unhoused in our communities and the LGBTQ community and their rejection or exclusion from church. Those are two groups, two kinds of demographics in all of our cities and counties that are marginalized, and I just have that passion for them. So started to put those gifts and the passions together. How would God have me minister in this way? And so that was the next part of that journey. And then I got a call from the bishop, from the DS, on behalf of the bishop to change appointments. And the job description for my position at first, which is pastor of discipleship, just everything in that job description was everything I had been studying, what God had shown me. And so it seemed like that just was exactly where God called me. I share all this for you because I want to encourage you as you're thinking about community collaboration, that it's not something you have to just jump into. I think there is a time of discernment, a time to study, a time to think about who you are, who God is calling you to be, and not only that, but who has God put around you. And so that same kind of journey of discovery can be not only a personal one, but I would encourage you to look at your church. Where are the giftings in your church? Who has the gift of humor? Who has a gift of teaching? Who has a gift of shepherding? Who has a gift of apostle, or being an apostle, right? So it takes some time to do that. So it was a full year of kind of sitting in that work before I found enough boldness to just start making connections in my community. So I want to share another kind of part of my journey that I just think is helpful. And I'm going to try to draw. So I don't have the spiritual gift of straight lines or art.
No, or color.
So that was that.
Right.
So I learned this actually. I did that straight. It is pretty straight, actually. I think it's because I wasn't thinking about it. I've done quite a bit of work with Chris Carr on 3DM. 3DM is a company, a movement, if you will, building disciples, disciple making. And they use shapes to teach all of the aspects of what it means to make disciples and grow disciples for Jesus Christ. It is an organization that is not Wesleyan, but it has a lot of great things to learn, and it also becomes very Wesleyan, I think, in some of the way we talk about it. So this was really also important in my journey, and I encourage you to consider this. This obviously is a triangle, and the triangle helps us to know about how to live a Jesus-shaped life. Because what we know is that Jesus spent a lot of time in communities. Jesus spent a lot of time with crowds of people, going into villages where he didn't know anybody, and yet people flocked to him. But there was something that Jesus, obviously around miracles and healing the sick, that would draw a lot of people, right? But there was something that just drew people in to Jesus wherever he went. And same with the disciples. They were able to do a lot of amazing things, and people would come to them. So how I have experienced some success in community collaboration, I think, is due to this work that I've also done around Jesus-shaped life. I am going to quickly get my scripture up. I meant to do this at lunch, but I got really caught up in the wonderful quiet disciples that we had. So just hold on a moment. Unless someone has their Bible with them. We're good Methodists. We don't bring our Bibles. I got it. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to look at Luke chapter 6. And it is verses 12 through 19. So I'm just going to read it once for you, and then we'll go into it. One of those days, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated apostles. Simon, who he named Peter, his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Simon, who's called the Zealot, Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. He went down with them and stood on a level place. A large crowd of his disciples was there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, from Jerusalem, and from the coastal region around Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him, to be healed of their diseases. Those troubled by impure spirits were cured, and the people all tried to touch him, because power was coming from him and healing them all. So in this short passage, we actually get a sense of what it means to live a Jesus-shaped life. And there are three elements. There's an up element, in, and out. So, Jesus had a relationship with his Father. So we're told at the very beginning, Jesus went up on the mountain to pray to God. He spent all night there, connecting to God. Jesus knew how important the relationship to his Father was. Spent time, prioritize it. In other scriptures, we hear how the disciples would go running or looking for Jesus somewhere, and he was like, I was with my Father. I was praying. Why are you so surprised? Right? He would take time away and be with his Father. And then the next thing that Jesus did was he called his disciples. He got his circle of friends, kind of that inner group that he could work with, that he would talk to, that he would teach, right? And then they went out onto the plain, and there were all the people. So they went out, and his mission was to heal, to save, so on, right? And so having these three elements in all that we do as Christians and as we are looking at outreach is to keep that up relationship, very important. Surround ourselves with folks, a circle of folks who encourage us, who will help us discern, who tell us when we're getting off base, that we can study with, and so forth. And then that we're also then out in the world. All right, so it's not out of the sanctuary in the narthex.
Yeah.
It is out in the world. This is what Jesus taught his disciples to do. We are disciples of Jesus. This is what we are taught to do. There's a lot more teaching along this line. I'm not going to go with it, but oftentimes we get stuck here. Like we like to spend a lot of time with God. We might go to prayer, we go to worship, and then we do some really good work with being in our small groups in church, right? And that's really cool. But it leaves out this other side. Sometimes we get really excited about being in mission because we want to bring glory to God, right? And we forget to nurture ourselves with our friends. And same here, we could be down here, stuck here, and we just kind of forget God has done anything around us or for us, okay? So that's just a side note.
Excuse me, you were saying that Jesus, I have a hard time hearing.
Oh, sure.
I'm seeing the three things: heal, save, and what was the other one?
Teach.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah,
Save, teach.
I had to stop and think what I said.
All proving.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Any questions so far? I'm kind of giving you background for this work. Yeah. Yeah, good. Triangle can also be used to talk about
I think that's
information, imitation, and innovation. And how Jesus worked with his disciples. He would teach them. He would encourage them to imitate him, things that he did. Then he asked them to go out and innovate, to go out into all the world, to teach and preach in his name, right? So it's this stuff has been a big foundation for me understanding what God has been calling me to in the community of Colorado Springs. All right. So, I shared with you my gifts, my passions. And so when I got to this appointment, I knew that there was going to be a lot of support for me being outside of the community. I wasn't expected to be inside the building a lot. I was expected to kind of take the church out into the community. Again, I understand, very grateful that I'm at a church that has other pastors appointed there so they can do the work of administration and worship and congregational care. So I understand that this has afforded me a really great opportunity to do this work. But I think in your churches too, you have folks in your churches, lay people, who can take on some of these other roles or can join you in taking the church out into the world, because your pastor has a lot on their plate, especially if you're being served by one pastor. So I do think that you have the opportunity to do these things, to find those community collaborators and to do this work. So what I think what Chris wanted me to do is kind of tell you about what I've been doing and some of the community partners that I've made so far. So one of the things that I did when I got to this church, which we have 100,000 square feet of building, right? It's big. It's a huge building. But what I quickly learned is that we do not utilize the building. There's so much in that building that does not get used. There's a lot of great stuff that's already happening in the building. And so there are pockets of rooms or floors that get used for some really great work. But we have an asset in downtown Colorado Springs that is underutilized, right? There are assets in your churches that I can guarantee you you're underutilizing. It may not be building, it may not be square footage, but it might be a garden. It might be people who have these gifts for reaching out into the community. But I would invite you to really think about assets. What are the assets that God has given to you in your church, in your community? So I looked at this big, huge church with all of it. We have a 4,000 square foot kitchen that gets used for nothing. Commercial 4,000 square foot kitchen. And there's no feeding ministries. No feeding ministries. Nothing coming out of that kitchen. And there's some reasons, because it's a community kitchen. You have to have a restaurant manager certification kind of person. Like, you have to have food handling things. So I get that, right? But we have people. We have some assets of people who like to cook and who probably already know all of the regulations. So I started seeking out those folks. Who is certified? Who can run something out of this kitchen? Then, because I'm looking at how do we use these assets and what are my passions and what I believe is the makeup of our neighborhood is we are surrounded. Our neighbors are unhoused. Of course, we have neighbors who are business owners and those businesses that are around us. But really, our neighbors, we're in a neighborhood of unhoused folks. We have all this room. They spend their days and nights outside. How do these things come together? So that's where my passion is starting to meet a need in the community. And so we had already, the church was already very welcoming of unhoused folks. We helped Family Promise get kind of restarted after COVID and some downtime. So we housed their day center and their offices. And that wasn't me who did that. It's just that was already there before I got there. But we saw the opportunity that that's a good partnership. And so I got on their board. So now I'm on the board of Family Promise so that I can be tied in there. And that's a collaboration that's through the church, myself, and this community organization, nonprofit. Then I started thinking about that kitchen and how do we get something going in there that would feed people and maybe even be something that people could learn a skill in. So there was an organization that had been housed in the city auditorium and was trying to remodel, upgrade it, and they needed $86 million to get that city auditorium to what they wanted to use it for, that nonprofit, and they fell about $83 million short. And so they had to leave the city auditorium, and I read that in the paper. And so I emailed the leader, the ED of that organization, and said, come look at the church. It was a culinary art, there was a culinary arts program, a preschool program, encouraging teachers, like support for preschool teachers. And we have a preschool, we have a fellowship hall, we have this huge kitchen. And so I just said to her, I've got space, I have dreams, can we collaborate? So she came and we met, we toured the space. She was really excited, and then they picked another spot to go to. Okay? So it wasn't so much a failure, though, because she introduced me to about 4 other people in the community that she said, you need to meet these people and talk to them. And through them, I have met even more people. Right? And so I have been able to start finding out who else has a passion for the unhoused, who knows the ins and outs of city government that can help me navigate where the city has been and what they can do, so on and so forth, right? So that's been this journey, kind of this one person knows people who knows some people and knows some people, and I have just let them keep introducing me. I'm thankful that I am an outgoing person. That does help, but meeting new people isn't too scary for me. But again, this boldness of mine is that there is something that can be done. I probably should have said at the beginning too, the Jesus-shaped life for me is all about building the kingdom of God, making sure that I'm doing my part to make the earth look more like heaven. Like that's the word. Transforming the earth to be heaven as God has intended it to be. So kingdom building is a big part of this. So because that's what I'm called to, I decided I need to be bold because it's not going to get done if I don't do it. And I'm not saying like I'm going to change everything. It's not that at all. But the work that God has given me, I'm not going to be bold in doing it. Who will? No one else going to do my work for me. So then, in just this last January, we had that big cold snap. I think everyone had those polar, very, very cold weather. And again, our neighbors, unhoused, it's going to be below 0, wind chill even lower than that. I looked at our building. We have thousands of square feet not being used. So I opened up our church as an emergency warming shelter. we ended up with 206 unhoused folks for 4 days. In our fellowship hall, we got to use that kitchen for a feeding ministry. In the midst of that, we started kind of calling out the city on their lack of response. They had some good response, but there was a lot lacking from the city, getting no support for the shelters and the places that opened. That's just me being a pot stirrer and some boldness, because it was really wrong. It's really wrong how many people are without homes and the things that we might be able to do in the city. And so that led to a phone call from the mayor's office to come in and talk about that experience and how we could all do better. So that was just a bright byproduct that I wasn't expecting, but it's been so great. And so now I'm on 2 task force at the city level and the county level to help us have better response in the next cold snap, because there will be another one, and also to really talk about housing and housing first. So it's whirlwind for me, is what I'm kind of saying, is just it was one thing after another. And I just keep thinking, I'm so grateful to God for leading me to all these places and all these people and to all these experiences. And so it has reaffirmed for me, or confirmed for me, this path that I'm on and this call that God has on my life for community collaboration. So when I think about, obviously for us, it was quite obvious when I came to First Church who were the marginalized in our neighborhood and who needed voices to step up for them, and so on and so forth. So the unhoused, that's definitely who we needed to look for. So I would invite you, when you go back to your places, to look in your neighborhoods and say, who's on the margins here? Who are the ones that may have less voice, who may be suffering silently? So that this is part of like opening our eyes and really seeing people, really watching, have conversations, stop and talk to some people, find out about their lives and their stories. There are people in your communities and around your churches who are silently suffering.
Right.
So I would encourage that work to be done. I had to let go of what it would look like to work with people who have a very different theological understanding than myself, living in Colorado Springs.
What?
There's fewer progressive, inclusive folks, but yet there are some people who are doing really great work. I am starting to make some connections with Springs Rescue Mission, who I do not want to work for, but I'm happy to learn from. So I had to let go of some of this is the boundary of people I want to work with, because I can learn so much from people who are outside of that boundary. So I encourage you to think about, what do you need to let go of? Are there some long-held, if you're talking about doing something in your church, where you're going to have to let go of what the church sacredness feels like? You have to let go of, we've never done it before, or old ways of thinking. So that's something to think about. There will be some things you're going to have to let go of in order to enter into this work of community collaboration. For maybe many of your places and towns, there are businesses near your church, and so, some of them, I know, there's a few smaller communities.
We have a senior center, we have a post office, we have a townhouse, and we have Methodist Church.
Yep. Yeah, but there's still something there, right? You look at who's around you and what kind of gifts do they have, whether it's businesses or organizations. Are there folks who need, is that where the marginalized or the silent sufferers is in those places, like the senior center? So really take a look at what's in your neighborhood, who's around you, and start creating a relationship with them. if there's a restaurant near you, go and eat there every week and get to know the names of all the servers or the people who own it, and be interested in their lives. And then there will be an opportunity to talk with them more about what your passions are. Another teaching in this 3DM is about finding people of peace. So, Jesus sent out the 72 and said, go into all the villages that I plan to go to. And when you come to a house, if they, you offer them your peace, and if they give it back to you, stay with them. And if not, just wipe the dust of that town off your feet and go to the next place. There are people who want to do work with others. They may not know it yet, but as you are making relationships with them and you see that they are people of peace, those are the folks you want to collaborate with.
Right back.
Friends, well,
Let's
There's one more. Well, our pastor was a pastor. She ended up marrying her Thursday.
Where to lean in is the other thing that I was thinking about. What are you gonna where's the foundation? What are you gonna lean into? For me, I lean into our Wesleyan Way of Grace. That's one of the other workshops this afternoon. The Wesleyan Way of Grace in many of our communities is a new way of thinking. There are other organizations or churches that just don't talk about grace the way we do. They don't practice grace the way we do. And it is, grace is something that this world needs a lot more of, right? And so I find that I just really lean into grace, which means I give grace to myself when I fail to land that big organization coming into our church. I give grace to others when it's hard to get connected with them. I give grace to those people who are not people of peace. I just, it's okay. Go do your life. That's great. And then offering grace to the people who I want to serve the most.
I always have grace. My thing is grace.
There you are. You're living it all the way around. All right. So that's all I have to share. Thanks for listening. But I want to hear some of what's yearning inside of you, what's starting to bubble up for you, or if you have any questions specifically about.
I do.
Yeah.
We opened up, I'm from Rutherford.
Yes.
We opened up the morning dinner like we did.
Yes. Good job.
We had a letter, okay? We reached out to the communities for help.
It's gonna move.
We reached out to other churches for
Early. That's what's wrong.
no. We have another that ran the center 24/7 for 4 days. We had all kinds of people join us. I'm talking mental health issues and stuff. Yeah. So trying to deal with them and keep them was quite challenging for the 9 of us for 4 days.
Yeah.
Some of us were running 22-hour days.
Yeah.
Okay. But so in doing this, I'm struggling with this now, with this warming center. Okay. We did it to help those off the street. But since then, we have been called every week on our cell phones by these individuals, wanting money, wanting this, wanting that, and I'm not talking money. We work in emergency populations. We are not a wellness shelter and have the resources for all this. It's been explained to everybody, but yet we're still getting a phone call. So I'm feeling very frustrated that we did this to begin with when I should be. And I'm thankful we did it because we did use one on Friday night. No, we did have one freeze to death. Okay, that would not come in. Okay, so I'm thankful for those that came in. But how do I get over this feeling of, I don't say being used, or that there was, I don't know. I'm really struggling, Jack, because like I say, we are getting calls. They found my personal cell phone number. And I'm getting calls on my personal cell phone number. We did what we could. We gave them the resources to reach out. Yeah. But what do you do? Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
I think having been in that situation before and knowing a lot of people in that situation, I think what happened, or maybe another way to look at it is, you were the first person that they felt like cared in a long time. And like the first person that they felt like saw them as a human valuable and worth loving. And so I totally understand, but there's nothing more you can do for them. And I completely understand how overwhelming that can be. But and I know what that is. And I think that's, having lived in Rocky Court, a failing of the community and the support that there is there. And kind of the idea that there's been there, like the food pantry, not the one that's per church, but before, it was like, oh, you can get a box of food once every 4 months. Well, people aren't hungry once every 4 months. You gotta possibly be the belly instead of shock. But you know what I mean? And so I just wanted to say, thank you. I'm sorry, that must be really hard. But see it as not the maybe with what she's looking to manage, but let it for the first people which is human.
But also, I mean, I think that boundaries are definitely super important, and I know you have them. We have boundaries at the church, even though we allow folks to sleep on our property, and we put a porta potty on our property, so folks have a place to go to the bathroom, so they're not doing it outside or in front of folks walking by. But there are boundaries around that. If it gets abused, it gets locked. If they don't behave. If they don't follow the rules of our property, they are banned for 2 weeks. And so they're just our boundaries. How they got your cell phone number, I don't know. I did not give my cell phone number to any house friends. They can call the church and they can get me even through my cell phone. Then we're just really clear about what we can and cannot do, what resources we have. Like for me, with unhoused, I can love them. I will help get them to resources or offer them the resources that are around. I will not drive them. I cannot make them go, right? Like those are like those boundaries, but I love them regardless. And I think that they do long for that. And so they keep coming and they'll ask, and I just say, nope, sorry, can't do that. Sorry, can't do that. But then they feel guilty by saying, no, I don't. I don't, because it's like, or what they'll say. And it's like, oh, no. Yeah, it is hard because there's so much suffering, right? It's really hard to watch people suffer. It breaks my heart. Right now we have a 69-year-old man, and his dementia is just off the charts now. He's incontinent. He has lice so bad. And that is probably the biggest gap in our city, is helping the elderly homeless. There's no place for them at all. So the next step for me, I feel very, very bad for him, and I want to do so much for him. But what I can do is advocate and start pushing some of these organizations to get going, to get those resources for him. Well, right?
The one elderly gentleman we have, it's on the bottom. Okay, and when he came in, he has literally 4 pounds of bear thorn. Okay, everything he owns on his body. Okay, well, this little old man, and to the point that now, what's going in the pocket, And I come, you can't take those glasses, they're here because somebody left them, type of thing. And you need to put my marker back on the board so I can use it.
I found during our warming shelter that it was like preschool for 2-year-olds. It was like, that their capacity to be in a relationship and respect their surroundings it's like a toddler, and their temper tantrums, and they're emotional, right? And so I just thought about what did I do with my girls when they were 2? How, firm boundaries, and then love on them. Yeah. Tim wanted to.
I just want to say, and you can't be their savior, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that's really hard for me because I want to solve the problem.
Yeah.
These are huge problems, and you can't solve the problem, but you can love and you can do your part, and maybe you can push it a little harder like Carrie's doing, with the systemic aspects of it. But each individual, your heart just breaks. And if you're a particularly empathetic person, which this sounds strange, I'm not, it's helpful if you're not. Because if you're a particularly empathetic person, it's going to rip you to shit.
And it has. Honestly, it has. So the other thing I would maybe encourage you in terms of community collaboration is start find the mental health professionals in your community and get them set up to come in the next time you are going to have it up, right? You get with, start going to the other churches and take a program there and see if some other volunteers can come. My life was saved the weekend that we did it when another church brought 16 people and said, put us to work. And I said, great. And I went and slept, for 4 hours because it was just great, right? And so I do think that God kind of, again, like as we heard earlier, God goes before us. Bishop said, God goes before us. And so there are people that already God is bringing in. So just keep talking about. Are there other questions? Yeah, Skip.
Do you work with the Continuum of Care organization here in the spring?
So I will be. That is, I've made contact with them and we'll be meeting with them soon. And
we're not very active in Flubba. It's about 30 to 40 organizations.
Yeah.
And it's impressive when they never know.
Yeah.
But
it's a continuum
of care. It's actually a national network.
Yeah.
And we're called Balance of State. An exciting name. But the point is that those 30 or 40 organizations collectively have so many resources and so many skills and so many possibilities for helping everywhere from the unhoused to those who are just low income and going through a bound state or families that have an abusive parent or something like that. And I don't say it's perfect, but there's a pretty good communication network. And a number of the churches in town are part of that. And how students very I know the Springs way it works is
one of the things we started doing at Pueblo Wesley is having a day in the community. And we either go into an organization, or lately we've been asking organizations to come to Wesley and then putting it in media and Facebook and all that, but the public is invited. And so last month we had SR Day, and there were two really spooky looking guys that showed up and sat down at different tables because we offered a lunch first. And some of the questions they had about food and shelter were pretty basic and wonderful, but everybody in our group was so wonderful and supportive of them. And I think that's one way of communicating too. And for years, our church has, it sounds silly, but bake cookies or cakes or something like that for the firemen and the policemen. And we give the teachers a day off at the church across, or the school across from us. And we provide their lunch so they don't have to do lunch. And that stuff really does foster good relationship. It really, really does. Because I know if we needed something, that Academy would probably come up with, well, we got this idea here of that. But I love the idea of the organizations. I would keep pushing that myself because there are so many people out there that I meet that don't really understand. I got a question yesterday and it blew me away. I know a lot about the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. She texted me and she said, don't all officers have wheelchairs in the office? No. Well, I had trouble getting in my car and dealing with the wheelchair. So I thought I had to go through this lengthy explanation. We had to get on the phone of telling her that the ADA is for people who already are in their wheelchairs, that are using them, and they have transportation services, medical services, whatever. And I gave her the number to the city lift and stuff like that. She had the weird idea that because she's in a wheelchair, the ADA said everybody had to. So that's an extreme of the best understanding that's out there in the community for what different organizations do. So I'm looking for to do that kind of thing more.
Very thankful.
And the scruffy guy at the time that we enjoyed their company. You mentioned the silent suffering, and that's something that I really see in our small town. Yeah, there's 800 people in our town, and yes, we all know each other. But it's really hard to reach people, even if you know they need the help in a way that's not necessary. And that's it. It's so hard. So if anybody has any idea about
Well, I think that's that building relationships is and I'll say what Kim said, like, we're not people's saviors, but when we see folks, we need to see them and then just be with them, start that relationship, build that trust, and then see how, see if there's that opening is what I would say. I think in small towns, isolation, even though you may know everybody, it still can feel very isolating if you have something going on that seems different from everyone else's experience. So I think that, again, think about what the gifts are of your church. You have folks, you're in Hugo, right? Yeah. The heart for children in that congregation. So I was in Lyman for.
Oh, right.
So the heart for children in that congregation, and so that's an asset. What does that look like for other people who are suffering in your community? Children can break down walls that we can't. So it's creative. That's also the thing is we should have to be really creative in these times and be bold. I mean, just start a relationship with people. Don't be afraid. What I know. God wants them. I'm going to go to Skip.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're in Beulah. Beulah's a really small town, and church is a really small church, but our women's circle started an activity. I call them love bags, but they put together the bags of they needed items or neat items, but they go out every month to about 30 different shut-ins in a community that size. That's a pretty good chunk of people that are just shut-ins and they're not associated with the church in many cases. And these women, they just go out and sit and listen and talk and build relationships, give them a little gift, but it's mostly the building relationships. And I thought between that and we also started a community cupboard about 5 years ago. Struggling right now, but those kinds of things are just really important for building those relationships.
So we are at is it 155? So I feel like we should stop so that you can maybe stop at a bathroom on your way to the next place. We could probably stop recording at this